The invitation. Charlotte Morgan straightened the emerald silk dress against her body, scrutinizing her reflection in the full-length mirror. The fabric whispered luxury, draping perfectly over her curves before cascading to the floor. After weeks of anticipation, the night of Thomas's corporate gala had finally arrived, and Charlotte was determined to shine. "You look stunning," said Penelope, her roommate, leaning against the doorframe with a glass of wine. "Thomas won't be able to take his eyes off you." Charlotte smiled, though her stomach twisted with nervousness. As a freelance image consultant, building her brand, tonight represented more than just supporting her boyfriend of 8 months. It was her first real opportunity to network with the business elite of Westlake Industries. "I just want to fit in," Charlotte admitted, securing a pearl earring. "These people operate in a different universe." "Please," Penelope scoffed. "You've styled half the executives in this city. If anything, they should be intimidated by you." Thomas had been oddly distant about the event, providing minimal details and seeming reluctant when Charlotte offered to help coordinate his attire. Now, applying her signature red lipstick, she pushed away the doubts. Their relationship had been strained. Lately, Thomas working late hours, canceling weekend plans, his texts growing increasingly perfunctory. Tonight would change that. The doorbell rang precisely at 7. Thomas stood in the hallway, handsome in his tailored tuxedo, though his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "You look nice," he said, briefly glancing at his watch. The drive to the Grand Meridian Hotel passed in relative silence, broken only by Thomas's occasional work calls. Charlotte gazed out the window, mentally rehearsing introductions and conversation starters. She'd researched Westlake's recent acquisitions and memorized the names of key board members. "Just so you know," Thomas said as they approached the venue, "it's going to be mostly business talk tonight. Don't feel like you need to stay by my side the whole time." "Of course," Charlotte replied, ignoring the sting of his words. "I understand how these events work." The Grand Meridian's ballroom was transformed into an elegant wonderland of crystal chandeliers and white orchids. Champagne flowed freely as string musicians played softly in the corner. Charlotte felt a flutter of excitement despite Thomas's coolness. This was the world she aspired to influence through her work. Thomas. A silver-haired man approached, clapping Thomas on the shoulder. "Excellent presentation yesterday." The board was impressed. "Richard, thank you," Thomas beamed, suddenly animated. "Have you met my girlfriend, Charlotte?" "I haven't." "Had the pleasure," Richard said, shaking her hand. "Charlotte is an image consultant," Thomas added, almost as an afterthought. "How fascinating," Richard replied, though his eyes were already scanning the room for more important connections. As the evening progressed, Charlotte found herself increasingly alone, clutching her champagne flute while Thomas worked the room. She smiled politely at passing guests, tried to initiate conversations that quickly fizzled, and watched as Thomas charmed his way through clusters of influential people. Despite her careful preparation, she felt invisibly beautiful accessory Thomas had momentarily forgotten. Little did Charlotte know that the evening was about to take an unexpected turn. It's one that would challenge everything she thought she knew about Thomas, herself, and the true nature of power in these glittering halls of influence. Betrayal and silk. Charlotte wandered through the opulent ballroom, trying to appear purposeful as she navigated around clusters of laughing executives. She recognized several faces from business magazines and news articles, people whose careers she had studied, whose personal brands she had analyzed in her work. Under different circumstances, she would have been thrilled by the networking potential. Instead, she felt like a ghost at her own party, transparent and unnoticed. She spotted Thomas across the room, champagne in hand, deep in conversation with the CFO. His confidence was magnetic. This was his element. For a moment, Charlotte felt a surge of pride, remembering what had drawn her to him initially: his ambition, his sharp mind, his apparent appreciation for her independent spirit. She decided to make another attempt to engage with his world. As she approached, the crowd shifted, revealing a sight that stopped her mid-step. Thomas was no longer with the CFO. He stood intimately close to a striking woman in a backless crimson gown, her hand resting casually on his arm. The woman threw her head back in laughter at something Thomas said, and he leaned in, whispering something that made her playfully swat his chest. "That's Vanessa Winters," said a voice beside Charlotte. She turned to find a woman in her 50s holding a martini glass. Head of marketing. Used to date your boyfriend before he moved to the finance division. I'm sorry, who are you? Charlotte managed, her throat suddenly dry. Diane Porter, HR director. I've seen you come in with Thomas. She gave Charlotte a sympathetic glance. Vanessa and Thomas were quite the power couple for almost 2 years. Office romance that everyone knew about but pretended not to notice. Charlotte's cheeks burned as she watched Thomas place his hand on the small of Vanessa's back, guiding her toward the dance floor. The orchestra had begun playing a slow waltz, and couples moved to the center of the room. If you'll excuse me, Charlotte murmured to Diane, who nodded knowingly. Charlotte positioned herself where she could observe without being obvious. Thomas and Vanessa moved with practiced familiarity, their bodies remembering old rhythms. Was smiling not the polite, professional smile he had worn all evening, but something genuine and warm that Charlotte hadn't seen directed at her in weeks. She felt sick, invisible, foolish for the hours spent preparing for this evening, for believing she could belong in this world, his world, when clearly she had been a temporary diversion. When the dance ended, Charlotte intercepted Thomas as he returned from the floor.
You look like you were enjoying yourself,
she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Thomas's expression shifted, something like guilt flashing across his features before settling into casual dismissal. Vanessa's an old friend. We were just catching up. An old girlfriend, you mean? Charlotte corrected. Were you planning to mention that tonight? Thomas sighed, glancing around as if worried about creating a scene. It's not a big deal, Charlotte. This is networking. You know how these corporate events work? Everyone has history with everyone. You've barely spoken to me all night, she said, hating the tremble in her voice. I told you it would be mostly business. His tone held a hint of irritation. Look, Vanessa's team and mine are collaborating on the Singapore project. It's important I maintain a good relationship. With her? Is that what that was? Maintaining a good relationship? Thomas's phone buzzed. He checked it and frowned. I need to speak with Harrison about the quarterly projections. Why don't you enjoy the food? The catering is excellent, he squeezed her shoulder perfunctorily. I'll find you later. Before Charlotte could respond, he was gone, merging seamlessly back into the crowd. She stood alone, clutching her half-empty champagne flute, acutely aware of curious glances from nearby guests, who had witnessed the exchange. Vanessa caught her eye from across the room and offered what might have been a sympathetic smile, or perhaps it was pity. Either way, it was unbearable. Charlotte placed her glass on a passing waiter's tray and headed for the nearest exit. She needed air. She needed space. She needed to be anywhere but here, watching the carefully constructed image of her relationship crumble in real time. The French doors at the far end of the ballroom opened onto a terrace garden. Charlotte slipped outside, the cool evening air a blessed relief against her flushed skin. String lights twinkled among manicured hedges and the distant hum of city. Traffic provided a counterpoint to the muted sounds of the orchestra inside. Tears threatened, but Charlotte refused to let them fall. She was not going to be that woman crying at a corporate event over a man who clearly didn't value her presence. She was better than that. Her work was built on helping people present their most confident selves to the world. It was time to take her own professional advice. Charlotte took a deep breath, smoothed her emerald dress, and gazed up at the night sky. She would compose herself, return to the party with dignity, make her excuses, and leave. Thomas could find his own way home. Tomorrow, she would reassess everything: her relationship, her priorities, her worth. What she didn't expect was that her moment of solitude was about to be interrupted by someone who would change the trajectory of not just this evening, but perhaps her entire future. The garden encounter, the terrace garden, offered Charlotte temporary sanctuary. Moonlight silvered the ornamental shrubs, while city lights sparkled beyond the balustrade. She inhaled deeply, trying to calm her racing thoughts and wounded pride. The quiet out here is rather refreshing, isn't it? Charlotte turned sharply, startled by the deep voice. A tall figure stood near a stone bench, partially shadowed by an ornamental cherry tree. As he stepped forward, the garden lights revealed a Distinguished man in his early 40s, wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. His posture radiated quiet authority. But it was his eyes, perceptive and unexpectedly kind, that caught Charlotte's attention. "I didn't realize anyone else was out here," she said, instinctively smoothing her dress. "I'm sorry if I interrupted." "Your solitude?" "Not at all." He approached with measured steps. "Benjamin Reed." The name registered immediately. Benjamin Reed, the notoriously private CEO of Westlake Industries, known for transforming the company from a regional player to a global powerhouse in just 5 years. His rare interviews were quoted like gospel in business schools. "Charlotte Morgan," she replied, accepting his offered handshake. His grip was firm, but not domineering. "I'm surprised the CEO is hiding in the garden during his own gala." A slight smile softened his features. "Sometimes leadership requires strategic retreats." He gestured to the bench. "May I?" Charlotte nodded, taking a seat beside him but maintaining a respectful distance. "You conducted the personal branding workshop for our executive team last quarter," Benjamin said, surprising her. "Your segment on authentic communication was particularly insightful." "You were there?" Charlotte couldn't mask her astonishment. "I don't remember seeing you," I observed from the back. "I find I learn more that way." He studied her briefly. "Your techniques have improved Harrison's public speaking considerably." Charlotte felt a rush of professional pride cutting through her emotional turmoil. "That's gratifying to hear. Yet tonight you seem—" Benjamin paused, choosing his words. "Carefully, ... less than comfortable in a room where you should, by all rights, be entirely in your element." The perceptiveness of his observation caught her off guard. "I'm here with Thomas Blackwood from finance," she explained, then immediately wondered why she felt compelled to justify her presence. Something like recognition flickered in Benjamin's eyes. "And how are you finding the evening?" A simple question, asked with genuine interest, somehow breached Charlotte's carefully maintained composure. "Honestly, terrible. I prepared for weeks to fit into this world only to be sidelined while my boyfriend reconnects with his ex-girlfriend on the dance floor." Charlotte immediately regretted her candor. "I apologize. That was inappropriate." "On the contrary," Benjamin replied, "it was refreshingly authentic, your professional specialty, as I recall." A comfortable silence settled between them. Benjamin seemed content to share the quiet moment, watching the city lights without pressing for conversation. "May I offer an observation, Ms. Morgan?" he finally asked. "Please." "You counsel others on projecting confidence and owning their presence, yet tonight you've allowed someone else's actions to diminish yours." His tone held no judgment, only thoughtful analysis. "In my experience, true power isn't granted by association, it's claimed through self-possession." Charlotte considered his words, recognizing their truth. Sometimes knowing and doing are very different things indeed. Benjamin nodded. "But you already possess everything needed to command that room." He glanced toward the ballroom doors. "The question is whether you want to leave feeling defeated or reclaim the evening on your terms. What would you suggest?" Charlotte asked, finding herself genuinely curious about his perspective. Benjamin stood, straightening his jacket. His expression held something Charlotte couldn't quite identify: respect, perhaps, or challenge. "I have 2 return board members to appease investors, to reassure." He extended his hand. "I could use the company of someone who understands the subtle art of making an impression. Would you care to accompany me?" Charlotte looked at his offered arm, then back at the ballroom where Thomas and Vanessa mingled with the corporate elite. A decision crystallized in her mind. Not about revenge, but about reclaiming her dignity and professional presence. "Mr. Reed," she said, rising to her full height, "I would be delighted." Grand re-entrant Shethy ballroom hummed with conversation and clinking glasses when the French doors swung open. Few noticed at first another couple returning from the garden terrace until recognition rippled through the crowd. Benjamin Reed rarely circulated at these functions, typically making a brief appearance before retreating to entertain key stakeholders privately. Yet here he was, entering the main floor with a striking woman in emerald silk on his arm. Charlotte felt the atmosphere shift as heads turned and whispers began. She straightened her spine, channeling every principle she taught her clients about commanding presence. Benjamin's steady pace beside her provided an anchor as they moved into the crowd. "Benjamin, didn't expect to see you mingling," called out. A silver-haired board member, eyebrows raised at Charlotte, Gerald Benjamin acknowledged with a nod. "I've been having an illuminating conversation with Ms. Morgan about authentic brand communication. Her insights have been invaluable to our executive team." Charlotte extended her hand. "A pleasure to meet you, Gerald. I believe your marketing division implemented some of the strategies from our workshop last quarter." Gerald's expression shifted. "From curiosity to interest, indeed we did. The response has been excellent." From across the room, Charlotte caught Thomas's stunned gaze. He stood frozen mid-conversation with Vanessa, his champagne glass suspended halfway to his lips. The shock on his face was almost comical confusion, giving way to disbelief as he registered who she was speaking with. "There's someone I should introduce you to," Benjamin said, guiding Charlotte toward a group of international executives. "Olivia runs our Asian markets division and has been looking to refresh their corporate identity." For the next hour, Charlotte found herself engaged in substantive conversations about branding challenges and communication. Strategies with decision-makers she would otherwise have spent months trying to meet. Benjamin introduced her not as a +1, but as a respected professional whose expertise the company valued. Each introduction built her confidence, reminding her of the identity she had temporarily forgotten. Vanessa approached cautiously during a brief lull, curiosity evident in her expression. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced," she said, extending a manicured hand. "Vanessa Winters, Marketing." "Charlotte Morgan, Image Consulting," Charlotte replied evenly, her handshake firm. "I didn't realize you knew our CEO," Vanessa remarked, the question implicit. "Ms. Morgan's workshop revolutionized our executive communication strategy," Benjamin interjected smoothly. "Her understanding of authentic presence is unparalleled." The subtle emphasis he placed on authentic wasn't lost on either woman. Vanessa's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "How fascinating," she said. "Thomas mentioned you worked in fashion." "Image consulting encompasses far more than fashion," Charlotte corrected gently. "It's about aligning external presentation with internal values, ensuring authenticity in every interaction." Benjamin's phone buzzed. He checked it briefly. "The Jakarta team is calling. If you'll excuse me for a moment," he turned to Charlotte. "Don't let Olivia leave without discussing the Singapore project with you. She's expressed particular interest in your perspective." As Benjamin stepped away, Vanessa's poised facade slipped slightly. "You've certainly made an impression tonight." Before Charlotte could respond, Thomas materialized at Vanessa's side. His expression, a complex mixture of confusion and calculation. "Charlotte," he said, his voice overly casual, "I've been looking for you. I see you've been busy networking." "Very productive evening," Charlotte replied, surprised by her own composure. The hurt remained, but it was overshadowed by a growing clarity. "Mr. Reed has introduced me to several potential clients." "Reed doesn't normally take such interest in staff partners," Thomas remarked, a hint of accusation in his tone. "Perhaps he recognizes valuable perspectives regardless of their source," Charlotte said, meeting his gaze steadily. "Something to consider in your own networking strategy." She excused herself with practiced grace, leaving Thomas and Vanessa exchanging bewildered glances. As Charlotte moved toward Olivia's group, she caught Benjamin watching the interaction. From across the room, he raised his glass slightly, an acknowledgement of a battle well fought. For the first time that evening, Charlotte felt truly visible, not as anyone's partner, but as herself. New Beginnings morning light streamed through Charlotte's apartment windows as she prepared her coffee. The events of the previous night seemed almost dreamlike. The humiliation, the garden conversation, the triumphant re-entrance that had transformed her evening from disaster to opportunity. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text. "Thomas, predictably. Can we talk? Last night was a misunderstanding." Charlotte set the phone down without responding. There was a time when she would have analyzed his message from every angle, searching for hidden meanings or pathways to reconciliation. Now, she felt only a detached clarity. Her laptop chimed with an email notification. The sender, Benjamin Reed. Subject line, Singapore Project Proposal. Charlotte opened it with curious fingers. Ms. Morgan. Following our conversations last evening, I've spoken with Olivia Chen regarding Westlake's expansion into Southeast Asian markets. Your insights on cultural authenticity and corporate communication align perfectly with our vision for the Singapore headquarters launch. Attached is a preliminary consulting contract for your review. The scope encompasses executive team training and brand identity integration. Precisely the expertise you demonstrated in your workshop. This is not charity or favoritism, but recognition of exceptional talent. Your ability to maintain professionalism and poise under difficult circumstances last night only confirmed my initial assessment of your capabilities. Please review at your convenience. My office is available should you wish to discuss terms. Regards, Benjamin Reed, Charlotte read. The email twice, confirming it wasn't a product of wishful thinking. The attached contract outlined a 6-month consulting arrangement with compensation that exceeded her current annual income. Her phone rang Penelope. Spill everything, her roommate demanded without preamble. Thomas just called here looking for you, sounding desperate. What happened last night? Charlotte laughed, the sound surprising her with its lightness. Everything fell apart, and then something better came together. She recounted the evening's events, from the humiliation of watching Thomas with Vanessa to her garden conversation with Benjamin and the subsequent re-entrance that had changed everything. So are you dating the CEO now? Penelope asked, excitement evident in her voice. No, Charlotte said firmly. This is professional. He recognized my work when Thomas couldn't see beyond my role as his girlfriend. There's a difference.
After
Hanging up, Charlotte moved to her home office and opened her laptop. Rather than immediately responding to Benjamin's contract offer, she created a new document. Morgan Consulting. 5-year strategic plan. For 2 hours, she outlined her vision, expanding from individual client work to corporate consulting. Building a team of specialists, creating workshops for women, transitioning into leadership roles. The path had always been there. She'd allowed Thomas's dismissive attitude toward her fashion work to diminish her professional ambitions. Her doorbell rang shortly after noon. She opened it to find Thomas standing there, his expression contrite. You're not answering my calls, he said, stepping forward as if to enter. Charlotte remained in the doorway, blocking his path. I've been working. Look, about last night, Vanessa and I have history, but it's over. His tone was practiced, reasonable. You overreacted? That stunt with Reed. Everyone was talking. That stunt resulted in a 6-month consulting contract, Charlotte replied evenly. And it wasn't about you, Thomas. It was about me remembering my own value. His expression shifted from contrition to calculation. A contract? With Westlake? Charlotte, that's fantastic. We should celebrate. Maybe I can help you prepare for the meetings. I know how the executive team thinks. The presumption was so characteristic that Charlotte almost laughed. Thomas, I think we both know what last night revealed about our relationship. One misunderstanding shouldn't erase 8 months together, he argued, reaching for her hand. Charlotte stepped back. It wasn't the dancing that was the problem. It was realizing I've been accepting your definition of my worth instead of creating my own. She softened slightly. I wish you well, Thomas. Truly. After he left, Charlotte returned to her laptop and opened Benjamin's email. She began typing a response, accepting the contract, but proposing several adjustments to expand the scope. As she worked, she realized that Gala had given her something far more valuable than professional connections or even the contract itself. It had reminded her that sometimes losing something smaller, a relationship built on shaky foundations, opened the door to something immeasurably greater, the reclamation of her own power and the courage to step fully into it on her own terms. Charlotte sent the email, then picked up her phone to call Olivia about the Singapore project. The night of betrayal had ended, but the story of her reinvention was just beginning.